There are a few myths about art um, that I think people should probably stop thinking are true. And that is that some groups of people have culture and some don't, and that some groups of people make art and some groups don't. And fundamentally, all humans all over the world make some form of art, whether or not that art is conveyed within an object that gets used in a functional way or not. Like, all humans make things. And I think that fundamentally, we have a need to, in a way, because art seems to help our our well-being in a way, like both consuming and producing artwork. Um, the creative process seems to be really good for your brain, and um, I'm a real believer that craft art is art, and that art doesn't have to be non-functional in order to be valid or taken seriously. And that really frustrates me in modern, well, in all of art history, basically. Like, if you go back prior to the Renaissance, in Italy as well as in the North, um, basically, like, all artists were considered craftsmen. Um, Even painters, architects, they were all considered craftsmen. And in, like, ancient Greece, which a lot of people consider to be, like, the birth of the Western culture, I certainly am more familiar with Western culture. I'm sorry. I I try to learn as much as I can, but since I have learning disability, like, it makes it more challenging. Um, because a lot of the stuff about uh, different cultures around the world are not necessarily going to be in audio form or, have a documentary made about it. Although the historians are trying to do better about acknowledging other cultures that aren't just Western centric. But it's difficult whenever, say, a group of people produces an art that is perishable. Like, I like fiber arts, which is a very perishable thing. Like thread and yarn and, like, materials that I make things with, like in wood, are perishable. Like, ancient humans, like, we don't often have wooden objects from them. We frequently find stone carvings and such because stone lasts a lot longer and so does bone. So, there might have been, like, incredible wood carving people, like, from different cultures and stuff, and it just disintegrates and it's gone. And I don't think that that form of art is any less valid, but it's more challenging for archaeologists. Um, and there's also, of course, the whole imperialism thing where they stole or destroyed, like, lots of different art forms and stuff, and um, like ancient sites and things like that. And I don't know how much of that is or has gone on because it's not necessarily going to be reported. Because essentially, the whole idea of imperialism is that we, or they, like the people going in, consider themselves to be somehow more advanced culturally and therefore superior in some way, which doesn't really make any sense to me, but. Um, it is boggles my mind because to me, like, there are all these brilliant like potters in Africa, like all over Africa, and there are people that weave and all sorts of things all over the world, like not Africa or like India and like Russia, everywhere. Like it's not like the Western world doesn't have a monopoly on culture. And oftentimes they digest things, like Western culture digests other cultures and thinks that it's a new idea somehow. And we also digest, like, when we have, ancient cave art that's found that gets reproduced and seen by artists, and then they reinterpret it and they digest it and they put it into their own artwork in weird and different ways. And it fascinates me the way that the Western world believes that it has a monopoly on the arts and on visual art because they have what they value. And to me, art is the human imagination and our ability to take something that's inside us or an experience and create something from it. And to me, craft art is a more important art form because it was a necessary one. And oftentimes people would take skills that they had to use to make something functional and make something beautiful. And I think that whenever you can play with skills that are really hard won, like, but they're everyday skills, uh but you can transform them into something else, and you can make all sorts of things that aren't necessarily useful, or they might just be really beautiful and useful. And it it really just seems to be a need in humans to have this like creative like experience, and we learn to think in new ways and use our body in new ways and stuff whenever we're learning how to make things. And it's just really like it changes you in ways. And um if you try different art forms, like not all art forms are necessarily going to be like your thing. um but you need to try the different types of art forms because you might find an affinity for, say, drawing with pen or like ink, and you might not like oil paints, or you might love oil paints and hate ink, and it's all a matter of finding what you connect with. And sometimes that'll be the art that you're drawn to, the art that you consume, like the art that you value most experiencing. Or it could be something that's completely different that you just are interested in how it's made and you're willing to put in the time and effort. Um, I don't think that all art has to be good. Um, I think that because we have a need to make art, not all art has to be like this miraculous thing. And oftentimes, the artists that um, are thought of as being great geniuses had entire workshops working for them. So they weren't necessarily doing all of the work themselves. However, they probably were the ones primarily designing the overall look, and they would probably get ideas from the artists that they worked with and stuff. Um, I know that certainly there's some stories about Michelangelo where in the sculpture that he did of Laurel and Apollo, where she's turning into a tree. Um, there's a famous story where uh, the guy who was making the leaves, these little, you know, paper thin leaves, um, he wanted to get credit for it, and Michelangelo was basically like, no. So I think he tried to sue him or something, or he definitely quit. I'm pretty sure he did. Um, but Michelangelo, of course, takes credit for everything. He like puts his name on shit. But anyways, um, essentially, art became what it is because, um, at least in the Western world, because of, well, there's the belief in like being a conduit of God or whatever, and also because the artists were so knowledgeable that they could sort of be arrogant enough to command this sort of like otherworldly respect in a way, because a lot of artists, well, I think that most art is propaganda in some form. Um, Certainly, a lot of art history throughout Europe has been propaganda for the church, and uh, like promoting yourself in a way, like showing people how important you are. Art is often a status symbol, and that can be like expensive clothing, like that's well made. It could be a painting of you. It can be all sorts of things. Because as humans, we have different status symbols according to what culture we're in and the time that we live and stuff, and also our own individual values. I might like have a status symbol that you might not have. Um, like all sorts of different things across different cultures and things, but it really does appear to be clear that we make things beyond the necessary. You know, although the necessary, like, beautifully well made necessary things are beautiful too, like, amazing. Um, and there are all sorts of amazing, like, craft art all over the world. There are these ancient Japanese pots, uh, and they were made by hand, and in the designs, there are still fingerprints of the people that made the pots, and I think that that's really amazing. I'm sorry, I'm being really general, and I'm not giving you lots of information about these individual things, and I don't even know if I know where to look it up at because I have a lot of information that I've learned throughout my lifetime, and I really don't know. Like, I can remember where I learned it from, but I can't remember like the name of the documentary or um like what country the documentary came from. I watch a lot of documentaries from England and uh in the United States, and essentially, if something's in English, I watch it. Australia, of course, too. But uh, if I have access to it, or if I can find out about it, because a lot of stuff you can find online, but it's just a matter of knowing to look for it, and uh, and knowing where to look. Um, Art history is a fascinating thing, and in different cultures, different things are valued, and some cultures really value abstract art more, and abstract art is really amazing. And I'm gonna do probably another episode about abstract art. But anyways, I really do believe that we have a need to make things. Even if we're not working with our hands, if we're working with our minds, to like make up stories or puzzles or ideas, or because I think that our minds just function that way, you know? I think that we have this, like, we're drawn to art, and I think that in a way, our minds really enjoy making art, even if it's not great, even if it's not high art, you know? It's really that being creative and, like, learning how to play and solve problems and stuff um, as you work. Uh, it's just an amazing thing, and I think that everyone like should at least try to to do something, make up songs, something. Um, I was raised in a house where everybody was like playing music and drawing and writing poetry and stuff, and we weren't necessarily all sharing it with each other, but we were all creating on our own and on our own terms. And um while like I have had some art classes, um and my siblings had music classes and stuff, but we weren't being forced to do any of those things. We were avidly enjoying the process of making our own things. And I really enjoy watching other people work too. Again, that's why I started this channel. But I think that I think that there's a real need that needs to be fed within us to like be creative and to make new things and to learn how to create, whether it's intellectually or physically, um, but to make something that only you can, in a way. Like, what you can, like, other people can copy it, but, like, make something that only you can make, you know? Like, have an idea from your own mind that nobody's, you know, maybe somebody's thought of it before, but, like, you making it will make it yours, right? So, like, reimagining things, even, like, taking an idea, like, a lot of artists do their own version of like the Venus reclining, and every artist's version is different. They're not all copying like the same thing. They might have similar poses, or like they might have similar themes and stuff, but they all reinterpret it. And like, really copying helps you develop skills, but to create, you have to create something that only you can. And, like, to have something come out of you that's as original as it can be. Because, of course, we digest other art and we mimic because we're humans. But, that creative process and the ability to imagine and to really kind of feel out what's going on inside you, in a way that you can't, like, not everybody will feel comfortable conveying things through words. And I think that a lot of people that have difficulty communicating with words really are drawn to like visual art because you can communicate without using words. Um, and anyways, I think that we have a biological almost need to make things. And no like group of people in the world has a monopoly on that. All over the world, we like all humans have made things, and during different times, like different groups of people made different kinds of things. It depended upon what they needed or what they wanted, and some of them were spiritual, some of them were like purely aesthetic, some of them um were useful, and then some of them like were not even designed for them to use, but maybe like were created with the idea of like giving to the gods. Like there are so many reasons why humans make things, and I'm just in awe of them. I'm in awe of all of the humans all over the world that have just created things, and sometimes like somebody'll just try something, and it I always wonder about that, like, you know, there are certain types of people that like to experiment with like making things and stuff, and like who was the first person to make a potter's wheel? Like that's a interesting thing. And and there are all sorts of different things that like never existed before humans started making them. And the idea that like somebody would just be playing around with something and like say spin some wool, and then after a while they might make something with that wool. Like that's a really interesting like thought process, and like it might have happened over time, like generations, or it could have been like a few really like um inquisitive like creative people. Like of course these things happen all over the world all the time, and it can't just be attributed to like a small handful of people. And I think that we sort of, I guess that it's a, because things are useful, we think they can't be art. And that somehow they're disposable because they're useful. And things are only like, you know, things do biodegrade and stuff, but essentially the idea that something's disposable is is all something that happens inside your head, you know? Um, you can reuse and reinterpret things in different ways, and you can take old clothes and like tear them into strips and like use them for other things, and or you can take a piece of clothing and like make it to a completely different new thing. And that really is interesting too, like just the overwhelmingly like ingenious, like creative spirit that all humans seem to have. And there's this idea that some people have that like some people are creative and some people aren't, and that's not true. And I think that it's really a matter of like it's like a muscle. It's like you have to use that muscle, and I think that a lot of creative people come from like kind of backgrounds where they didn't have a lot to do. Like I'm from the country, and we couldn't necessarily like I couldn't walk down the road to like, hang out with my friend because I live out in the middle of nowhere. And there weren't kids that lived around here that were like my age. So like basically you got to read or you got to make things. And like other than chores and stuff. Um and of course you could grow things, and growing things is a seriously like amazing thing too. I would recommend it to anyone. It really helps, um, I guess, put a positive spin on like time passing. If you can manage to get things to grow, which I can't always. Um, but anyways, humans are amazing, and you should really play around with some art. Like, you don't have to go out and like buy all the fancy stuff. You can just kind of like have a pencil and like a piece of paper or like anything that you're interested in. You don't have to buy like everything that you need for it right away. You can kind of like play around with like different like small projects and like see what, works for you. And um some people think more three-dimensionally, and you might not be somebody that likes to draw, some people really like to build like things um like out of wood or whatever. Just I think that find what you're drawn to and like think about the sorts of things that you're interested in, and just play around with stuff like make up stories or like design something in your head or whatever. I really do recommend that like everyone tries art, even if it's not something that you're going to do for a living. Um, Not everybody is going to be the next, Michelangelo or whatever. Um, and that's fine. And you don't have to start making art because you want to be like some great artist. You can make art because you enjoy it, because it makes you feel better. Like you don't have to do it because you have emotional problems, although it helps. But, if you're just bored or like feeling stuck and, you know, in your life, it really sort of helps you open up mentally to different possibilities too. I think that both looking at, experiencing, and creating art is something that changes your brain. in a way. I don't know what the science is on it. I know that they're still doing studies on art and stuff, and I know that music does. Um, but yeah, just go out there and try something. Try to do something that you feel connected to, that you enjoy. Anyways, be good to yourself. Um, Try to be a kind person. Talk to you later.